sit down, we need to talk. There's this dangerous delusion that's been infecting film discussion for decades and it finally needs to be addressed and corrected. The error is the idea that good film equals good direction. If a film is good, then it's automatically well directed. Also, bad film, bad direction. That's nonsense. Here's the thing. Directors get praised and berated for all sorts of things that have nothing to do with them. All they do, which is a lot, but still, is pick up a screenplay and adapt those words on the page into shots. Into images captured by the camera. That's it. A film is a combination of images and sounds, nothing more. A director must be judged by shots, just like a musician must be judged by notes, a painter by brush strokes, and a writer by words and sentences. It's the shot and nothing more. It's information, composition, color, length, and all you see.
Tell the director he should have his head examined. He shouldn't have shot the picture, he should have shot himself.
With shots in mind, you can see how often directors are given credit for work completely outside their purview. Most of what directors are credited for comes from the screenplay.
Audiences don't know somebody sits down and writes a picture. They think the actors make it up as they go along.
Open your eyes!
It's the screenplay that determines the context of everything that happens, and it's the context that leads to the feeling you're feeling, or not feeling. You can shoot a father crying for the death of his son in close-up or in a wide shot, and both choices can be considered equally sad. It's not the shot itself that is sad, it's the entire story that led to it. Even a camera as dispassionate as Michael Haneke's can stir emotion in the right context. People have been taught to believe that if a film touched them, entertained them, or annoyed them, then the direction is inherently touching, entertaining, or annoying. An unfounded belief.
He's a kid looking for a dad.
There's hardly anybody to play with around here.
That's why you can make those recut parody trailers that used to be so popular.
It's really a miracle of evolution.
You're beautiful.
Because, out of context, the vast majority of shots in the vast majority of films can be used for any genre.
At Faro High, Ramses was the biggest player around.
No doubt.
I missed that meme.
So let the games begin.
Now let's look at a few things that should be credited to the screenplay and not to the direction. Dialogue? Obviously, it's the screenplay. The plot? It's the screenplay. Characters and their personalities? Also the screenplay. Locations? It's the screenplay. Flashbacks? Screenplay. Cross-cutting? Screenplay. Montages? Screenplay. Dreams? Screenplay. Theme, message and worldview? Believe it or not? Screenplay. Praising a director for something that's specified in the screenplay is like praising the gardener because the peacocks are colorful. You can't praise a director because a character, say, shot another character. It's a plot point, it's in the screenplay. But you can praise the director for how the gunshot was shot. The angle, the lighting, the speed. What do we see? Gun and victim? Just the gun? These are all choices made by the director. Yes, directors do change script aspects here and there, to a higher or lesser degree depending on the movie. A director can and often will change a scene's location or time of day, they can remove scenes and lines, they can influence the whole story from the start. But each film has a different process and the truth is, we'll never know for sure in every case. I don't expect many to agree with my next point, but I believe that regardless of who came up with what, you should always attribute shot choices to the director and narrative ones to the writer.
Well, it's called a flaming...
Mo! It's called a flaming Mo. That's right, a flaming Mo. My name is Mo and I invented it. That's why it's called a flaming Mo.
Everybody knows that in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the gunshot Joe came from Harrison Ford or some random crew member, depending on where you read it. You should still credit screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan anyway, cause that's supposed to be a screenplay matter. We all know it was director Roman Polanski's idea to give a depressing ending to Chinatown, but we still must credit Robert Towne.
Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown.
As you know, Bob, film is a collaborative art, and the confusing crediting game can swing the other way. Remember the overhead tracking shot at the climax of Taxi Driver? Not Scorsese's idea. That was in the screenplay. Still, it's a directing matter, so we should credit Marty. And what about the diving bell and the butterfly? It's about a paralyzed man who can only communicate through his left eye. A good deal of the film is shot from his POV. You're trapped inside his body alongside him. A brilliant directing touch. Or is it? That primordial visual decision is in the screenplay. It was screenwriter Ronald Harwood's idea.
And I was about to call her to say, no, I can't do it, when this idea came to me that Jean-Dominique Bauby should be the camera.
Director Julian Schnabel got an Oscar nomination for Best Director. He also won the Golden Globe and the Cannes Film Festival Award for Best Director. What percentage of these decisions do you think stemmed from the POV decision? I'm not saying Schnabel didn't earn the praise. Ultimately, the visuals were his call. He could have told Harwood to shove it and shot the whole film from overhead shots. What I'm saying is these examples are all outliers. They do make the discussion more complicated, but most of the time, the writer writes, the director directs.
I know you must think that I'm, you must think I'm pretty sick or something. You must think I'm pretty sick.
There's also the subject of judging directors based on the quality of the performances. I say that's only useful if you are an actor who worked in the movie. How many directing awards did John Wells get for the acting showcase of August Osage County? Look at that cast. He could have called in sick every day. Professional actors are expected to give good performances. Praising the director for good acting borders on patronizing.
You might at that.
With amateur actors, you could make a point, but let's move on. And this whole belief that the director is responsible for every single tiny thing in the story is just the fallacy of the auteur. And on that point, it's not polite to point, but I point at Andrew Sarris as the culprit. For those who don't know, auteur theory is the belief that the director is the supreme author behind the movie, and the best directors are the ones who impart their personalities and philosophical outlooks to each film they make. The auteurist guide for analyzing a film's direction. Step 1, watch the movie. Step 2, watch 10 more movies by the same director. In any case, Andrew Sarris didn't invent auteur theory and its nonsense fanaticism. Truffaut and his school of irrational blind idolatry is at fault more than anyone. Read this thing. The critic who thinks like this has no credibility. Great book though, but Sarris did popularize the auteur theory more than anyone else. His The American Cinema, Directors and Directions, which ironically will teach you nothing about direction, is the reason why so many people today attribute narrative, theme, worldview and such to the director instead of the writer. A director doesn't need to do his job well at all as long as he's got different screenplays with similar themes. Sarris will even justify visual aspects as metaphors that brilliantly represent whichever's the theme. As long as Sarris agrees with that theme, of course. Efficient jack-of-all-trades journeyman can fuck right off. It's not completely Andrew Sarris' fault, of course. He admits himself he doesn't consider auteurism a concrete theory, but just a hypothesis to explain why some films manage to become classics. That's an objective I wholeheartedly share. I also agree with him that interviews have no critical value and that the Cahiers reviews are piles of gobbledygook. There is a little wisdom in this book, especially in the opening text. His pantheon is mostly solid, the Ophiuls chapter is wonderful, and I'm sure many of my viewers will have fond memories about how the book was a useful guide in the 70s. I can't even imagine how helpful his italic titles must have been in the pre-internet age. Hell, even I discovered A Woman's Vengeance because he complimented Aldous Huxley's literate dialogue.
Added to all this, you appear to be practically dumb. Now, there's a good deal to be said for dumb women in every sense of that ambiguous word.
Great find.
In the first place.
But this book, it stinks. Call this a detour, but for now I'm going to iconoclastically commit a crime of lèse-majesty and take the piss at Andrew Sarris' The American Cinema. Leave aside that this is a book about screenwriting, obsessively centered on personal interpretations of worldview, masquerading as a book about directors. This thing is an avalanche of this director has this vague negative trait instead of that vague positive trait. He just chooses the most meaningless fuzzy term for what he likes against the most meaningless fuzzy term for what he dislikes. Specificity would kill his argument. Obscurantism, my archenemy, the bane of my existence, the cancer of film criticism and theory. That's his language. Listen to these monstrosities. Preminger's two shots are stylistic expressions of the right-wrong in all of us as our share of the human condition. Richard Brooks's punches are seen and not felt. In Lolita, Kubrick emphasized the problem without the passion, the badness without the beauty, the agony without the ecstasy. Bud Bediker's camera is elemental, but not elementary. Louis Milestone's editing was mechanical rather than analytical, and his tracking synthetic rather than expressive. Stanley Donen's personal musicals are somber affairs with only intermittent flashes of inspiration. Carol Reed's feigned objectivity disintegrated into imperviousness. John Cassavetes is groping when he should be gripping. Joseph L. Mankiewicz makes a cinema of intelligence without inspiration. His wit scratches more than it bites. Personally, I find this book too holistic when it should be robust. It merely sachets but takes no strides. It unfortunately aims at Tatatita instead of Bababooey. Then there's that hilarious Griffith paragraph where he says that his trees have strength and vulnerability that expressed metaphorically the emotional life of his heroines. Unlike those lousy trees of Antonioni that serve as metaphors of cosmic indifference. Jesus Christ. Just make up whatever baffle gab you want and pass it off as film criticism. Griffith's trees are better than Antonioni's trees, what the fuck? Look at all those disgusting displays of cosmic indifference. I'm gonna be sick. Now we're talking. So much harmony with nature. Such strength and vulnerability. What a beautiful emotional life of the heroine. Look at all those metaphors. So many metaphors. What I mean is, what you'll actually learn about film directing from this book is close to nothing. His abstruse ramblings are unfalsifiable. You cannot pick a frame, a shot, a scene, point at the screen and categorically state this, there, right there. That's imperviousness. Here, notice the syntheticness of this tracking. I rate his book the lowest score I can give. I rated an Antonioni tree. I recommend you to read the Schreiber theory for an amusing and needed counterpoint. And Saris did literally say that a bad director is someone who makes bad films. Time for the next part of the video. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of the infallible Orson.
First of all, I think directing is the most overrated job in the world. It's the only one I really love in show business, but I think it is tremendously overrated.
Truffaut must have felt some type of way.
There are a lot of bad directors at work. I mean, we can say that.
There are more bad directors at work than people know.
What Orson is saying here is my whole argument.
The only job that a director can do in a film of real value is to do something more than what will happen automatically.
The director's task is to bring something new to the screenplay. Most don't, and yet they direct forth.
The only profession in the world where you can be incompetent and go on being successful for 30 years with nobody ever discovering it.
Well, now why?
I mean utterly and truly incompetent.
Try this. Ask ChatGPT to direct a scene. It will plan out basic coverage just like any mediocre director who's got a producer breathing down his neck. Establishing shot, over the shoulder, close-up exchange, static actors, a dead set, the paint-by-numbers of directing. 14 unimaginative shots dressed in intentional alibis for what a non-auteur genius like Michael Curtiz did in 3. It's a matter of time until directors also fear AI.
20,000 francs says it isn't.
Many, oh so many directors fail to improve the scripts they're given or even write themselves in any way whatsoever. But they're considered good because the screenplay doesn't spontaneously combust when they touch it. It's vicarious fame.
I am being rude and I hate rude people.
Then if you observe the other end of the spectrum, you'll find those rare creatures Andrew would say don't exist. The good directors of bad films. Off the top of my head, I'd say Vittorio Cotafavi, perhaps the best director of bad films.
This stone must be destroyed. It has already caused too much evil. The blood of Uranus can never be destroyed.
If I name more names, I may start a war, but what else have I been doing for the last 15 minutes, right? I'd include Mario Bava, Seijun Suzuki and Dario Argento. Scusi, Italy. Not all their films are bad, of course. You can't deny these are talented craftsmen who elevate typical genre fare with artistic staging and framing, regardless of the screenplay's quality. It's easier to notice the difference in books. The writer comes up with the story, the writer writes the words. The best writers are great at both, but some might tell intriguing stories with pedestrian prose, and some might articulate words brilliantly to recount something uninteresting. Story and style in a single action. Writing. In cinema we split story and style into screenplay and direction. There are many films I would call great specifically because the director elevates it highly with visual creativity, making the story less important than the accomplished telling. Recently we had Longlegs, a superficial and slightly dull supernatural screenplay bolstered by an outstanding achievement in directing. The strong scope frames, dark warm lighting, distant angles, use of negative space, clinical camera movement and uncanny timing add eerie foreboding to every scene, even the ones that would otherwise come off as tranquil. That's a director who rose to the challenge of improving the film. Turns out a few emotions still can be evoked even out of context. I'd say dread-related ones, loneliness, the ones you can actually pull a frame and point on screen. Just try to make a recut parody trailer of Longlegs.
You're beautiful. You're beautiful.
I gotta point this out now. There's this scene from Ted Lasso where a character meets his girlfriend during an emotional crossroad. They share a sweet moment, romantic music. And the scene ends in this dark, geometrical, distant high angle from the second floor corner. Just like the POV of a murderer. This is bad directing. And it's a type of mistake that's so hard to find. Like I said, most shots need a context to cause a feeling. To actually pull off one that does it, and it's the opposite of what you intend, that's just wow. Change the music, shake a bit, add some panting.
Funny. Really funny.
What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
I once made this video about the evolution of Woody Allen's directing style, about how his early funny films are unremarkably directed and how the influence of D.P. Gordon Willis led him to a more sophisticated approach to blocking and camera work. Give it a go once you're done here. Also like, subscribe, Patreon and all that jazz. And I'm gonna address a comment that illustrates everything we've been fighting today.
If his earliest films are among the funniest, then they are well directed. I appreciate your videos, but what you are espousing is orthodoxy. It's more insightful to say this is how he shot his early films and this is later and this is what those two approaches lead to. I bet a lot of people watch videos like this and come away thinking they understand film, when all they really understand are your preferences. I think this is why David Bordwell's approach is the best way to actually stimulate critical thinking. Avoid imposing hierarchies. Instead analyze the effects.
First thing, you're gonna use David Bordwell, the biggest, most palpable influence on this channel, as my opposite. David Bordwell, who spent his life writing books and articles defending creativity in directing and opposing lazy trends. David Bordwell, who literally pleaded filmmakers to dial back from intensified continuity and try their hands at ensemble staging as classic directors used to do. David Bordwell, who when comparing Hu Shaoshen's way of shooting dinner table scenes to Zhang Yimou's, called the latter less original and less intricate. David Bordwell, who never watched a clumsily shot, choppy modern Hollywood action scene without bringing up a specific Hong Kong film that did the same thing with talent. You never read David Bordwell. He liked Andrew Sarris though, somehow. Now on to the subject. If his earliest films are among the funniest, then they are well directed. That's precisely the dangerous delusion we're going over. If a film is good, in this case, funny, then it's well directed. Obviously no, but let's humor the premise. We're talking about Woody Allen's early funny films, from Take the Money and Run to Love and Death. So let's pick a film. I choose Love and Death because it's the best one in every way. I choose this line exchange to analyze Woody Allen's direction.
And I'm just a worm, an insect, some kind of crawling, disgusting, creeping little vermin. You know you can stop me.
I will when I disagree.
I love this joke. Here it is written down. Unless you're dead inside, let's presume we all agree that this is funny. It's funny on its own, written down. Thank you, Mr. Screenwriter Woody. How did Mr. Director Woody shoot this exchange?
I have Ivan's old pistol.
The shot starts a little earlier, following Sonia and Boris into the room. She looks for a gun and Boris steps closer to the camera as it excludes Sonia to catch only his monologue. The specific part we're analyzing is a simple static close-up with shallow depth of field. Every movement is limited to Boris' expressive face and his occasional raised hands. He finally turns off-screen to Sonia and we hear her reply off-screen.
I will when I disagree.
It's funny. I say his most inspired choice was in keeping Sonia's zinger off-screen. Boris speaks his monologue in a single, looking straight at the camera. That's the choice of Tony Richardson in Tom Jones and Laurence Olivier in Richard III.
Now is the winter of our discontent.
From such films, we are accustomed to the idea that when a character is speaking directly to the camera, nearby characters are not listening. So it's funny when we finally hear Sonia's reply and realize she was attentive throughout. For a better discussion, I chose an unusually visually inspired choice from Love and Death, instead of one of the many moments limited to simple close-up exchanges.
Soon the dark blanket of night shall settle over us all.
Hey, you've been going to finishing school.
But still, does Woody's shot make the scene funnier? Suppose the joke had been shot the way Powell and Pressburger shot this dialogue scene from the small back room. Let's ignore the brief close-up exchanges and pretend it's a oneer. Maybe Sonia is at the desk looking for the gun while Boris monologues around the room. We follow him to the left, to the table, to the foreground, through this tiny gap to the window where he finishes the speech and she finally speaks.
I will when I disagree.
Perhaps it's Sonia looking for the gun around the room while Boris monologues in place.
Crawling, disgusting, creeping little vermin. You know you can stop me.
I will when I disagree.
Suppose it had been staged like this exchange from Billy Wilder's underrated The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes.
Maybe if we got married, then they'd really talk.
Boris is Watson throwing a tantrum in the back, while Holmes' Sonia is indifferent in the foreground. We pan with the exasperated character to the right, to the left, while always keeping in frame the cold character for contrast. The punchline could come at any moment.
You know you can stop me.
I will when I disagree.
What if the camera is more dramatic? Suppose we do it like this monologue in Olivier's Henry V. As our character speaks and speaks, we approach from an ensemble to a tighter angle. A very effective way to emphasize the text. When Kenneth Branagh shot the exact same scene, he used the exact same technique. The punchline could come after we pulled back to include the other characters, as Larry did.
They cried out for sack.
Or the punchline could come from off-screen, as Ken did.
They say cried out for sack.
Suppose we had been more over the top. What if Boris spoke in a modern 360-degree take, like Tarantino does here in Reservoir Dogs?
Some kind of crawling, disgusting, creeping little vermin.
Maybe the camera comes to a halt as Sonia is brought to the frame just in time for the punchline.
You know you can stop me.
I will when I disagree.
Then we could go the Dogma route, handheld junket.
Crawling, disgusting, creeping little vermin. You know you can stop me.
I will when I disagree.
And what if we only had the audio, as in radio?
And I'm just a worm, an insect, some kind of crawling, disgusting, creeping little vermin. You know you can stop me.
I will when I disagree.
Still funny. Each and every approach presented here keeps the text funny. Because, and I hope I emphasize this enough, it's the screenplay that is funny. Woody Allen himself told the same joke in Manhattan Murder Mystery.
She thought I was a lowlife and a wimp and a vermin and a roach. Just jump in anytime you want to defend me. You know?
Hey, I mean, I'm waiting for you to say something I don't agree with, okay?
Oh.
It's less funny than in Love and Death because the text here is too wordy, trying to sound more realistic.
I will when I disagree.
Hey, I mean, I'm waiting for you to say something I don't agree with, okay?
Oh, you're nailing me.
The difference between all the directing possibilities we covered is exclusively in the control of audio-visual language. And regardless of personal taste, we can all agree that not all these approaches show similar mastery over the potential of cinema. Though why someone would prefer low-quality craftsmanship or even give it the same worth as mastery is beyond me. This is the stance that leads to so many undercover bad directors.
There are more bad directors at work than people know.
For my money, I agree with Steven Soderbergh.
There should be things that look hard,
There should be things, whether it's a performance or something that's happening in the shot. I feel like when you watch a movie, there should be things that you look at and you go, that wasn't easy to get, you know. I don't want to see a movie made up of stuff that was really easy.
You can move the actor, you can move the camera, you can move the actor and the camera, you can use the set, you can use the sides of the frame, you can use depth, you can, yes, use off-screen space, but after so many alternatives, which barely scratch the surface of filmic options, would you point at the original shot and say, this is above average directing?
I'm just a worm, an insect.
Olivier could break the fourth wall without that stopping him from being creative in his staging.
Pursue my way out with the bloody axe!
We should never praise a professional for doing the minimum.
Do something more than what will happen automatically.
You can write, the sun is rising. Or you can write, but look, the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon high eastward hill. It's the exact same idea, but which one shows a greater mastery of language? Thank you for watching, you beautiful Griffith tree.
Look, the soft golden dusk is already transmogrifying itself into the blue star-sprinkled night.
Careful, because that gun may be loaded.
Oh.